So my approach to recording a electric guitar starts really with the amp. I try and get a good clean sound out of the amp that is well balanced, but also has enough clarity to be heard in a mix. I prefer to do that and then let the guitarist adjust with guitar pedals, because they're going to, usually I find guitar sounds or guitar tones that come in are heavily pedal dependent and can pretty much plug into any amp and get their sound. Very rarely do I find somebody that comes into the studio specifically with like an amp that they want to use because they're not using pedals. I think that method is slowly going out of style, because you can record the same character out of a plexi on full bore. You can get that sound now with pedals going into a small practice amp. So I find just to get a good clean amp that will take pedals well is more important than getting a massive 8 stack that can blow your house down. So I mean, if you're going to go out and buy an amp for this sort of thing, anything Fender Deluxe will be great. The classic high headroom, clean Fender sound. We've all heard it. This one you can pick up for £800. I'm not sure what that would be in dollars. Is that like $1,000 or something? But Tom will send internationally. If you don't want the kind of American clean, you've got the obvious second, which would be the Vox AC30. I think there's an AC15 you can get as well, which is a 1x12. Similar thing, slightly different character, a little bit grittier, a little bit more. Basically, it's got a lower headroom, so it breaks up a bit quicker, which means you can get a slightly more driven sound out of it. But it's still plenty of headroom to do what we're doing. Again, around the £800 mark. We're going to use the PRS Dallas, which I think is trying to get that kind of the kind of tweed sound. So settings wise, regardless of amp, really, I immediately just set all of my EQ controls to 12 o'clock or halfway up. This gives me the ability to take away or add from a midpoint, which is very powerful when you're trying to just balance a sound. I also turn off any inbuilt effects. For this case, we've got a reverb. And I just bring the volume up to somewhere where I can sit next to it and it's not going to deafen me. So this is pretty straightforward. This one, I just default or initialize my amps to this. And then basically I play it. And this is what this one will sound like. So it's this is the Telecaster that I showed in a video on Facebook, but for those who didn't see that, it's a Pine Telly with a P90 in the bridge, a P90 in the neck, and a 52 spec pickup in the bridge. So if I play on the P90 neck with this setup, you'll be able to hear the what we start off with. So it's, sounds like an electric guitar, sounds like a telly. Nothing crazy. And essentially from here, I listen to it. I try and identify things that I don't like, and from there I make adjustments. So to my ears, this sounds, there's a little bit too much bass energy in it. It's a bit kind of muffled. I basically want more clarity out of this. So the setting that I've kind of snapshotted, which is exactly fixing exactly that. I've boosted some of the treble up 2 notches to 70 in my case, or it'll be if you start at 5, it'll be 7 on your amp face. And then I've dropped the bass down again 2 notches, so I've just kind of created this this mid hump effectively, and then I've left the volume again at 30. So if we listen to that, same pickup, same tone settings on the guitar, this is just amp. So we've got a bit more clarity now, and there's not as much kind of low-mid information there. And yeah, again, I'll play this for a bit, or get the artist to play it, and just listen to what the amp's doing. You know, we've got, as I said, we've got the clarity in the treble, but I'm not hearing the guitar character. So to fix this, we can add some mid-range, which is generally speaking where a guitar will sit in the mix. So if we jump to the next snapshot, which is essentially all that's happened is the tone has been bumped up 2 notches to 7, or in my case 70, and everything else has stayed the same, guitar settings, all of that. So you can hear that we've started to kind of get a bit of character out of the guitar now. It's not quite as flat. If I just do a quick A-B for you. So this is with the mids set lower. And then if I go to what I've named tonal clean. Hopefully you can hear that there's a little bit more character added in there now. So at this point it should be sounding pretty good. We've got a bit of clarity going on, we've got some tone being the kind of character of the guitar, and depending on what the song requires, this next stage may or may not include reverb. If it doesn't need reverb, if he's got a reverb pedal or we're adding reverb afterwards, then I just move on to getting the volume set. But for this example, we're going to add a little bit of reverb to give it a bit of space. So if we jump over to the kind of tweaked tonal settings, so the bass has come up a tiny bit, the middle has dropped slightly, and the treble's come up a little bit. Also, we've added a touch of reverb, and the volume stayed the same. Now, whilst these small changes may seem arbitrary, these are changes that I've made particular to what I think needed to change in my room with my guitar setup. Hopefully at this point your settings will be different, because you'll have a different setup, a different guitar, different amp, but it's more about the process of getting a clean tone that you like, and then once you've found that setting, you can continue to use that in multiple recording sessions, and it'll start to help you build a platform off of which you can adapt from with guitar pedals. We're going to touch on the guitar pedals a bit later on in the video to show you how this translates. So now that we've got a little bit of reverb in there, and we've adjusted our EQ so it's a little bit smoother across the range, we haven't got the kind of big blocky sections, we'll have something that sounds more like this. So we've got a little bit more character in there. We've just finessed the mid-range. That slight bass coming in just helps keep it nice and warm sounding, but we've still got the clarity from the treble and the space obviously given to us by I think it's a spring reverb in this amp. Still a tad quiet, and that's the next stage. We basically just go in and further tweak things, bring the level up and the reverb to suit, and just kind of tweak it until it's sounding good. So as you can see here, volumes come up a notch, reverbs come up to match, treble stayed the same, middle stayed the same, bass has stayed the same. But now we'll actually start to hear the presence, I guess, of the guitar amp, hopefully in the room. But you would hear this if this was coming out of a 12-inch speaker as well. It would start to fill a space in the room, and you can start to get a bit of feedback from the guitar will start to kind of play the amp a bit more. Hopefully, that's what we're trying to get. Is instead of it being a kind of one-dimensional playing the guitar and the amp is just kind of sat in the corner, we want them to really feel the interaction between the guitar and the amp. So it's funny how a subtle volume difference just makes it feel a bit more solid in the overall. So now that we've got our amp settings dialed in, we can now add some effects. Now, I don't actually have many guitar specific effects in VST form, but I've kind of emulated a few of the more common effects that you might find. So for example, let's start off with a little bit of modulation by adding some chorus. This is a great little VST, by the way, if you ever come across it. It's made by Tal, and it's a somewhat decent Juno style chorus, but it works really well on guitar. So immediately that's just the amp dialed up with a bit of analog chorus. Now a small clone would work really well here. The Boss have a CE2, I think it's called. It just adds a little bit of movement, a bit of interest. The natural thing to do after this would be to put a short delay on the amp. I've put this after the amp, but if you can't do this, it works. It's a slightly different flavor if you put it in front. Now I'm using the Waves J37, just because I didn't have a Space Echo plugin, and this is essentially the same effect, just using a much more expensive machine than a Space Echo. But we get a similar sound. It can do big floaty Pink Floyd chords. And all that big proggy stuff that seems to happen as soon as you put a tape delay on a clean amp. But what if you don't want a clean sound? Maybe you want to go, I want distortion. I want something a bit more aggressive. Well, I put this up on Facebook the other day. It's I think it's actually a free plugin that you can get. But it's a Proco Rat emulation, and I've done my best to try and balance the amount of gain so we don't get a massive volume jump on this. But this works really well going into a clean amp. So if I take off the other two effects, so we can just A/B between them. So this would be the clean tone. And if I kick this on, now I've got it set fairly conservatively, but of course you can play with this, maybe bring the volume down a tad, and you can get some really fat tones just even with your you know, quote unquote clean amp, just by putting a pedal in front of it. I should mention this is all still on the neck pickup, which is a P90 on my Telecaster. So if we add a bit of modulation to this, and just so we can hear things a bit better, I'm going to bring the gain back down and just bump that volume back up again. So you're starting to get those classic sounds, and I'm just using, you know, cheap or very affordable stuff here, and it's most of it's just down to getting that good clean sound to begin with. You know, let's add everything in, and we can get a huge sound out of it. You know, turn that up loud enough and it's going to sound great, right? So yeah, clean amps, clean amps, Fender, Vox, whatever you. I mean, PV have some great clean amps. You know, I mean, just because everyone takes these things and absolutely rinses them into breaking up, doesn't mean that you can't play these things clean. Carlsbro have some good amps that you can pick up pretty cheaply. But just find an amp that sounds good to you, and then, you know, spend some time in the shop just trying to get a good clean sound out of it, and then ask the guy for an overdrive pedal, something classic, something that you can identify with, something like a Tube Screamer or a Rat or a Big Muff or something really just like really elementary, and just see what it does. Maybe play a few amps and pick the one that you like the best, because I guarantee you can always get more distortion from having multiple pedals. But if your amp's distorting, then you've run out of headroom.